For those of you who don't know me, hi, my name is Carrie. You're here today because you want to participate in some creative playtime, and it's something that we all deserve. We are going to play with something called Collagraphy today. So it's actually a form of printmaking for those of you who don't really know. And what you do is you create a plate for yourself, a printing plate that then you use like a stamp to create textures for backgrounds for artwork or to create an original artwork. It can be a standalone artwork by itself, depending on the imagery you select. So, creative goals for today. We are going to use scraps of fabric, yarn, and cardboard to create a unique artwork. And I want to show you strategies for creating your Collagraph plates and then how to print from your plate. You might actually have to let it dry and come back and run your print later, but I'm going to show you how to do it. Some logistics about today's workshop. As I've already said, please ask questions. If I can catch them while I'm doing the demo and they're pertinent to what we're working on, I'll be sure to answer them as quickly as I can. It's always great to have scrap paper on hand so that you can trial stuff out and feel comfortable trialing it out and making mistakes. I don't really like using the word mistake, but a lot of people feel like they don't know how to do it right the first time. So you want to give yourself room for exploration. So make sure you have paper available to you for that, okay? So we're going to get started now. I'd like you to get out a piece of paper and you're going to draw 4 boxes on that piece of paper, and you're going to draw them. They could be small rectangles or small boxes about 3 by 3 inches in size. And I'm going to show you another slide in a minute. And I want you to use only line and shape to communicate the images that you see in each box. So there's 6 images you're about to see. You're going to choose 4 of them and pick 1 for each box and use only line and shape to try to communicate the mood or feeling you get from that image. I'll be drawing this alongside you, and then I will switch my screen to the demo camera so that you can see my drawings as we work on it. And then we'll be transitioning into the printing. We're going to use this as inspiration to create our mood textures. Okay. So make sure you have a piece of paper and a pencil, and you want to draw those 4 boxes. So let's do that first. They don't need to be fancy. They don't have to be perfectly measured. More like a planning space or creating thumbnail sketches to give you an idea. Okay. So now I'm going to switch the screen, and you're going to be able to look at 6 images, and I'm going to keep the screen up for a bit for you. Now I'm going to switch to the mood images, and I want you to select 4 of them and use, like I said, line and shape to create visuals in each little box you've drawn to represent the mood that you find. So I'm going to leave the images up for a few minutes for us so that we all have time to draw and think about it. And again, simple lines and shapes. It's fine to just follow along today too and learn and then apply the ideas yourself. But for those of you who want to work, I want to make sure you have the time. I've drawn 4 of mine, so I am going to switch to my screen to show you them really quickly. I just did some quick mood-based drawings using, again, like I said, that line, texture, shape to inspire some thinking. And what's going to happen is I'm going to use these to create 1 or 2 or even 3 today, if we have the time, mini mood plates. I'm going to show you techniques so you can create little plates that you could then use in your mixed media work. I will also show you one that I'm working on that hopefully is dry by now, that has more of a realistic edge, if you want to call it that. I'm going to show you, let's see, my starting image, owls. So you can have an image reference like this one, where you are working from life, so to speak, right? You're looking at images that you like online, photographs you've taken, or royalty-free images. And then what you do is you use materials to create an interpretation that's texture-based on a piece of cardboard. So here you can see my plate. Right? I've used all kinds of materials. I've used fabric and pieces of cardboard and cut up texture from paper and folded paper and string, twine. I've used aluminum foil. You can see it's not an exact replica. That's not the intent, but I'll try to run a print with it today so you can see what it looks like to get a feel for it. What I want us to do right now is to cut out some cardboard. And I'm just going to use some scissors and cut similarly sized pieces of cardboard, similar sizes to my little doodles. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't even have to be exactly the same size. We'll see how many we can play with today. So I'm going to get 2 going. And essentially, right now, I'm creating plates. I'm creating the base for my imagery. Okay? So I'll have 2. I'm going to move my imagery away now. I'm going to just have it visual for myself for reference, and I'll pull it out again. You know what? Maybe I can, I'll pull it out as I'm working. So I'm going to look at one right now, and I'm going to look at my flower one. So it was kind of this like bubbly, dotty kind of thing. Okay. So realize that the surface of your image, right? Whatever's sticking up is going to actually receive your ink. It's going to be what shows on your piece of paper when you do your stamp. You want to think about that when you're raising and adding texture and different objects to the surface of your plate. You could even draw with just regular glue and then place it and let it dry and see what happens. I have all kinds of materials. Really, the sky's the limit. You can use tape. I'm also going to bring out, I made some woven paper that you can use. Like I said, you could use aluminum foil, or I even got like my little makeup remover pads. That could be really interesting. It's up to your imagination and the resources currently available to you. I really like the texture that the twine's been giving me and other work I've been playing with. So I'm going to just cut some twine straight away. And I'm going to double it up because I want it to be a bit thicker. So I'm going to actually twist it together. And now I am going to figure out a fun and playful way to put it on my plate. And I want it to be inspired by my drawing. I don't have to copy the drawing. I've got to think about what would feel fun and give the same vibe as the doodle I was creating. And that looks like it might be neat. So then I'm going to hold that to the side. I'm going to hold it down with an object so that I don't lose my space. And then I'm going to put a whole bunch of glue on my plate. This is a place where less is not more. So keep that in mind for yourself. I'm just going to goob my glue on so you can see. Then I am going to place my string. Sometimes some of the stuff won't stick down. So while I'm waiting for it to dry, I'll put something not too heavy on it, not something that'll stick itself to the surface, but something that'll hold it down while the glue sets. While I'm waiting for that one to set, I want a little more glue on it. Try to get it adhering to the surface. I also found my hole punch, and I got all of the scraps out from the hole punch. I was thinking they could be fun to try too and see if they take up ink. So I'm just going to put them randomly where I already have glue sticking out and see if they take. If you've taken previous courses with me, I've mentioned before that odd numbers, for some reason, it's part of a rule of composition, is they're more appealing to our eye. So keep that in mind when you're arranging elements. And then I have some scrap foil that I think could add some interesting texture too. I'm gonna kind of play with it, mold it into some shapes and textures, and figure out where I want it to fit on my plate. And then I'll glue them all down, but I'm gonna decide where I want all of this element to go first. Kind of want maybe just like one big one right here. Nice. Okay, so now I've got to glue those down. So you can use a hot glue gun. You can use Elmer's glue. You can use whatever will help it stick so that when it's dry, you can put ink or paint on top of it to treat it like a stamp. That's ultimately what we're doing, is we're creating a kind of stamp for ourselves. Collagraphy has some intricacies because it can be a finished artwork all by itself. Though I guess you could say stamps are too, to be fair. I think some stamps are just beautiful carvings by themselves. Definitely don't want to demean any art form, but there's something about calligraphy because it is this combination of multiple materials that I find very interesting. So that's kind of my little like happy, bouncy, exploratory image. It's not the same as that, but has kind of the feeling and the mood. I want you to play with that, and let's try one more. I'll get out some other materials and layer that as well. I'm going to let that one dry. And I do think we'll have to wait. I might have to show you the print of the texture in the Facebook group because it's not going to be dry tonight, I'm pretty sure. But I do have a plate to print from to show you how that works. So let's try some other textures and materials for this plate. I do like the idea of these. It's cotton. One side is very fluffy, on one side is a little smoother. So I could try both and see what kind of texture it offers. So again, lots and lots of glue. I've seen some beautiful prints done with Collagraphy where they've used mat board, and you can actually cut away fine pieces of the mat board to make very realistic looking renderings of portraits or landscapes. I have a Pinterest board for you all that shows you all kinds of calligraphy techniques and artwork. So then it's also layering, right? You can use things like corrugated cardboard. There's wonderful texture and dimension to it, right? So I'm going to remove all this kind of scrap paper hiding the bumpy part of my cardboard. And then I'll layer this on with a nice contrast to these very soft edges. Maybe here, and maybe just a wee one right here. Yeah, I like that. It's about playing with these materials and seeing how they interact together. How can you make them play together in a way that creates an interesting small composition that you could then use to incorporate into your own artwork, or for the act of art making itself, for the fun that it provides you when you do create. These can be artworks all by themselves, even in abstraction. Depends on what your aim is for the piece that you're creating. Now, I have two very different ones. Okay. For me, I think I strayed a lot from the images. The second one, this one, I definitely feel like has that quality of this. And this one, I was thinking about people following a pattern and one person standing out. And so this kind of still plays with that idea, but I got more drawn into images. I'm going to switch to that Pinterest board real quick just to give you some other imagery so you can get some ideas of what they can look like when your image is more of a realistic reference. Here are some beautiful prints, both realistic and abstract. I really like this one down here. Okay, you can layer colors. Here's a plate. That's a plate. So someone used tape and perhaps paper mache and some string to create a bug. These are the print results here, here, and here. These are print results. These are what people have been able to take. And here's an image of what I was talking about before, where you can make a mat board plate and remove pieces of mat board a little bit at a time to create something more realistic if you want that kind of control. And here's an example of some other plates. So here, the person's working very much about shape and line. There's small focuses for printing, and you can choose different colors. I really love birds, which is why I picked the owl. I love some of these images. And this is another plate. That's not the print, even though it looks like an artwork all by itself. That's a plate that someone created using different pieces of fabric. So they layered fabric and different kinds of paper here, and then they put their string on and glued it all together and placed the texture and whatever that they used for the bird. So you can choose to put different color on different areas. Here's another example of kind of what we're playing with here is how you can do different things with different materials. I've seen some beautiful collagraphs that are made solely from fabric. I have a wonderful book I'm going to show you in a bit that will give you some inspiration. Aren't they amazing? I really think these works are just stunning. There's so much opportunity when you work with collagraphy. It's really up to your imagination what you create. This is a beautiful abstract piece. So you could make it completely emotive. Save that site for yourself, the page in the chat rule, so that you have access to these, or start your own board so that you have it for reference. Up to you. I would like to show you how to run a print. This is the part that will be hard for you to do because we're waiting for our plates, our smaller plates to dry. But I do think it's important for you to understand how to run the print once you arrange all of your objects on the surface, because the amount of paint that you use, as well as whether you wet your paper even, is an important consideration. So here are some test prints that I ran on a Collagraph earlier this week. So I'm going to move those aside to dry. Okay. So this is a Collagraph plate of mine that I've already used. So it's all blue because it was covered all in blue ink. So it's kind of hard to see, but I used glue and cardboard and yarn and twine. And then I ran it on different surfaces. So I tried it on a piece of paper, and that's what I got. So you see the texture shows, and it depends on how much paint that you have on your plate, as well as how much paint you push to the surface of the paper you're working on. I recommend that you have a spoon. I need a spoon or a baron. So I'm using just a metal spoon that I'm going to use to rub on the back of my paper to take up the ink that I put on the surface. You can use acrylic paint, but it dries really fast. So if you have retarder, add retarder to it. Either if that doesn't work, you just need to print quickly so that you make sure that your paint doesn't dry while you're trying to get it off the plate, because you don't want the paper and the plate to stick together. I also recommend that you have some kind of tough card paper that you can sandwich between your plate and the paper so that you don't ruin your paper. Okay. So what I did with this plate, right, is here's my plate. I registered this while it was still wet, placed it down. I placed this on top and made sure it didn't move, okay? And then I grabbed my spoon and I burnished. And I tried to make sure that the paper was taking up any and all ink that I had placed on my plate. You should wet your paper. I mean, you don't have to, but most printmakers will wet their paper a bit, especially if they're working with thick paper, to help the ink take the paper. So here's one where I made this too wet, I think. There was some bleeding in here, okay? And this one was actually a completely dry piece of paper. And then this one was slightly sprayed with water. You can have a tray where you dip your whole piece of water in real quick, pull it out, and then use a dish towel to dry it. Or you can use a spray bottle and lightly spray your paper. So I have some scrap paper, and I'm just going to lightly spray it. Okay. So I'm going to let that soak in while I now ink my owl. For inking my owl, I'll try to ink them upside down and we'll see how this rolls. I am going to use some water-based ink that I have, okay? So I have Daler Rowney's, I think the print is backwards for you, but it's a water-based block print ink. I'm going to stick to two colors. I want to give the owl's eyes one color, and then I'm going to make the rest of the owl blue, surely because these are the only colors I have. So I have white, yellow, and blue block printing ink. So that is what I'm going to put. Something to note is I can see this ink. It's really liquidy. Do you see that? I need to stir it up before I grab the paint and make sure and use a paintbrush to paint it. I'm going to paint with a paintbrush the surface. So I'm going to make sure that's all kind of stirred up before I try to put any on my plate. And I need to do that for my blue as well. Get my blue out. I just used my glue, so it looks not too liquidy, but there's still some going on in there. So I'm going to stir that baby up too. The first thing I'm going to do is paint the eyes. I really want this yellow to show up. So I'm going to make sure it saturates where the orange of the eye of the owl was. So you see where the orange is? That's where I'm painting my yellow. Less is sometimes more for printmaking. You don't want to gob the paint on unless you want it to be really, really thick paint, which means it might remove some of the texture that you've created by using these different materials. It is truly a learning process. I don't know what this print's going to look like. I did not test this before the workshop because I want to show you guys that you roll with the punches, that you explore and experiment and see what happens by making the choice to explore and try. So you'll only do that if I model it, really. Otherwise, what's the message I'm sending? I'm cleaning my brush, and now I'm going to grab a bunch of glue and start applying it. See, what's nice is it doesn't cover all of the texture of the aluminum foil, so it should have an interesting effect. I've not yet decided if I want to paint the whole background a color. I think that when it's printed, I could then paint the whole background black, or blue, if I decide that I want a different effect. Cleaning my brush out. Miss, I do not want green, I want my blue. So applying it to the surface, and you need to paint the whole surface, which is one reason too I suggest if you're using acrylic paints that you work with smaller plate, because obviously if you have to spend all this time covering the surface with this ink, it could dry really quickly if you're using the acrylic, and you could have nothing to pick up when you put it on your paper. Doesn't have to be neat. This isn't your artwork, right? This is your plate to create an artwork. It's like a paintbrush. It's the paintbrush for your canvas or your piece of paper. I really want the beak to show up, so I'm trying to make sure that's nice and thick with paint. And you can see I haven't covered all of the twine, right? I'm allowing the texture to show through. I actually just put some in my yellow, which I didn't mean to do. So should have been a little more mindful of that. I want my eye nice and blue. The pupil. You can always draw or paint back into these as well when they're done. It does not have to be where sometimes I think I can get in that mind space where it's like, well, if I'm working with acrylic paint, that's all I'm allowed to use to achieve the effects that I want in my artwork. Who made that rule? I'm making it up in my head, right? So keep that in mind for yourself. You're only limited by the choices you make in your artwork. You can use a Collagraph plate more than once, but each time you use it, it's going to be different because each time you press down on the surface to take up ink with your paper, you're going to flatten it. You're going to change the paper's reaction to the ink on your plate. So each time makes the whole print different. Most people only use a Collagraph plate a few times before they would retire it. You can make more than one print. You can do something called a ghost print too, and we'll try that today, where I don't even add more ink, but I apply another paper and see if it takes. Okay. So I feel like I've covered most everything I wanted to. So I'll put my brush aside. I'm going to move my ink far away. I'm going to spray another piece of paper so that I can try that ghost print first out. So hopefully it'll be wet and just a nice ready for us. Okay. So here's my paper. It's kind of damp still. Now I'm going to do something called registering. So registering is a term that means placing your paper on the surface without moving it. So I'm going to put it down and it's where it has to be. I can't move it again. If I move it, it could actually smudge my image. Now that I've done that, I'm going to carefully lay my kind of paper support on top. I'm going to take my spoon and I'm going to burnish. The surface has different heights. So different amounts of ink will take up, and using the tip of the spoon will help you get into the little thin places too that you might miss. So I usually use a circular motion. It doesn't really matter. You can write however you want, but it's very important that your paper stays registered, stays in the same place that you put it when you started touching the surface of the plate. It's hard to know, unless you have a printing press, it's hard to know if you've burnished evenly. I suggest that you do it a little bit more than you think you need it and let your arm ache a little bit. That's usually a good indicator that you've been going at it for a while. I am going to take a peel. And what I do is I make sure that half of it remains down. And then I just flip up the side, see what's taking. And it looks like I have way too much ink on this. So I'm going to pull it and let's see what happens. My ghost print might be interesting. Oh, that's kind of fun. I think using multiple colors on this would really help the owl stand out. You have different directions of things showing, which I really like, but I'd really like his beak to show out. So maybe making the beak black or other areas really dark would help with the experience. So very fun. You definitely can get the feeling of it. I'm glad I made the eye yellow so that we can see it. So let's try another one. Okay, so I'm not adding more ink to the surface. I'm leaving it exactly as it is. And this is a ghost print because you're taking a ghost image, you're going to apply it to the surface again without adding more ink and see what kicks up. So I'm going to register a new clean piece of paper. I am going to put my support paper down. I'm going to burnish again. I like the print and the texture I got, but I do think with that piece, I'll want to paint and draw into it too to give more form to the bird and that feeling of the owl. Looks like it could be interesting. Feel like I'm teasing you all. Yeah, there's a lot of ink. I could keep doing this for a while without adding more ink to the surface. That has kind of a ghostly quality to it. I like that there's a feeling of direction and movement here. I think I should do that more. You can see it too on the edges of the cheeks, right? I like how this eye came through. I needed to push a little more here. A brayer doesn't really work, Michelle. This is the brayer for those of you who don't know, because it just goes flat, right? So if you're going flat over this huge bumpy surface with your paper, it can't push down to get into some of the spots to take up the ink. I have seen it used on more flat pieces. So perhaps if you only used paper textures and you didn't have some things that were really sticking up high, you could try the back of a brayer. But I think burnishing by hand is a lot more effective personally. And of course, if any of you are lucky enough to have a printing press, it's a whole different experience as well. And that's another reason this is unique is it's a combination of the ink that you use. It's a combination of the pressure that you apply to the paper, right? So I missed this eye entirely. I should have dug in there more. But some of the times you don't know because it's a process of discovery. That's something I really enjoy about printmaking is you don't fully know what your end result's going to look like. It's a game of trial and error. So let's see. I don't know if any of my guys are dry enough for me to do a quick print to show you. Oh, I'm getting to all over myself. This one might hold better. So let's think on this one and see what it looks like. Need a frame and piece of paper. In terms of formal printmaking techniques, something to think about is your printmaking paper shouldn't have dirty fingerprints on it if you want to be very formal and very traditional with printmaking techniques. If you were going to have a clean border around it, you want to make sure, like my hands kind of got ink all over them. I'd also want a clean surface to print on. So perhaps I'll put that down. Did I put this down? There you go. Let's give this one a go. This one's more flat, so a brayer may have worked with this. Fine. My cotton's sticking. Too much ink. Let's try it again. You can see some of the texture, but it's a little muddy. Has kind of a landscape quality to it, actually. You guys see that? Let's try this again. So if my paper's too damp, that can also impact the print. Sometimes it is good to run a print as well. It's called running a print when you do what I'm doing right now. It's good to run a print with dry paper as well to see if you like the surface quality and the texture that shows when it's dry versus using wet paper. So I'm not going to burnish as much either and see that gives me a little more. Yeah, that's nice. That's good. So I had too much ink on the first one. That's a lovely ghost print. That's really fun to play with. I could totally stitch into this as well. Something else that you can continue that sometimes people don't think about is you can use metal and put metal into it. You could sew and stitch into it. And like I said, you can just use plates of fabric. I have a wonderful book I'm going to show you. It's called Collage, Print, and Stitch. Collagraphy for textile artists. It's got beautiful, beautiful work. I'm going to move my print so that I don't get this book all messed up from ink. Okay. So here's a beautiful print plate. Look at this. It's truly about experimentation and play. And so running multiple prints sometimes gives you a more successful print later. So this is a print plate. This is not a print artwork. This is something that she created to roll ink on and then print with later. Here's a print that she made using a plate that she created. So she stitched into the surface and then rolled the ink, and you can see the effect that it gave her. I'll show you another print. Yeah, so here's a nice plate. Can you see that one? Lovely textures in it. So very textural based, can be very abstract, or it can be like I showed you in the pinned sections of my Pinterest board. If you like this book, I do have a link for you. So you can take a peek at it here. It's an affiliate link. You are under obviously no obligation to purchase. It's just a book that I think is super fun and has really inspired me, and I want you to have access and information to it. So it's called Collage, Stitch, and Print by Val Holmes. Val Holmes, Holmes. There's nothing that you have to waste in terms of your art resources if you're interested in collagraphy, because all of your scraps can be something that you experiment and trial with, which is something I really like. We looked at scraps of fabric today and yarn and cardboard and how we can mix and match them to create a unique artwork or textures for our artwork. I showed you the different materials and how essentially I use glue and layer it all down, but you could also stitch or sew into a Collagraph plate instead. I've shown you how to run some prints from your plates, and you can see it's a bit of trial and error. There's this experiment nature to this kind of art form, and I want you guys to have that opportunity to play. So thank you for being here. I hope that you guys had fun and you got some ideas and inspiration. I'm going to play with these prints a little more. I'm looking at them. I want you guys to share your art exploration, the artwork that you create, and your ideas. We shouldn't be afraid of trying art skills or art techniques or growing our skill as artists. It's the only way we're going to find how we want to express ourselves and develop our artistic voice. Well, guys, thank you again for being here. I value your time. Let me know what you think, and please share your work. Let me know when your little plates dry, what they look like after you ink them up. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.